Let's get hyped. Welcome in to the Husker247 HypeCast. I am Mike Schaefer, joined, as always, by Brian Christopherson, Michael Brunks, and this week's special guest, 1620 The Zone's John Bishop, joins us not to talk about the Florida A&M Rattlers. Instead, we're going to be talking about the Maryland Terps. A little bit different sport, a little bit different game, but I'm sure that there's some crossover value in there for you, John.
Well, if you want to talk about gaudy uniforms, Maryland and Florida A&M have that in common. Florida A&M's got the very bright green and bright orange, and Maryland. I don't know what Maryland's going to bring to this game on Saturday, but the helmets will likely be very busy and confusing.
Well, that has been a hallmark of Maryland football for as long as really I can remember. It's one of the great traditions they bring to the Big Ten and have been bringing since the mid-2010s. All right, HypeCast, you guys know how this goes. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball where there's no shortage of real questions for Nebraska. And we will start with Michael Brunts, and we will start with Emmett Johnson. Brunts, do you think, based on what Matt Rule has said, and talking about the running game, do you think there's a chance that we see more Emmett Johnson going forward, or the consistent sort of 13, 14 touches a game that we have gotten over the last month indicates more likely where Nebraska sees Emmett Johnson?
Yeah, I would like to see more Emmett Johnson. I think Matt Rule would like to see more Emmett Johnson. I don't know that we necessarily are going to see more Emmett Johnson. It seems like the recipe they're working towards is kind of a split between Grant and Johnson with the carries, and then a little sprinkle here and there, just a sprinkle of Josh Fleeks. And I think that's going to be, what they're going to do. The one thing I will say, though, is it would seem to me that this is the kind of game where if Nebraska wants to try to get downhill a little bit with the running game, they should be able to do that. The question is whether or not Nebraska's play callers and coaching staff is willing to continue to stick with it, because even back in that Michigan State game, I mean, that first drive out of the gates of the second half, you're moving it great on the ground. You found some nice plays, and then you're throwing it on first down, or I think they ran an option keeper or something like that on first down, and it puts you behind the chains so much. I would like to see more of just turning around, handing the ball off, and a little bit more of that, and a little less reliance on Heinrich Haarberg going forward. But I would not bet on that happening, but I would love to see it.
BC, we have spent the week kind of hearing about the maturation and progress of Malachi Coleman. He only has 4 catches this season, but it has seemed noticeable out there watching him play, whether it is blocking, whether it is the opportunity he had on the jump ball. It seems like we are getting the development Nebraska was hoping for. Unfortunately, they have to play Malachi Coleman a lot. What have you heard from the coaches, and what have you seen with your own eyes from the talented freshman wide receiver?
Malachi's playing pretty well. He's been open more than his stat line suggests. On that throw that Haarberg made to Jaden Doss, where there was about 2 or 3 defenders around him, he had Coleman for a layup, man. It would have been a big play, and it's that sort of catch. Like, if you could get Malachi on we almost saw him break a huge one for 90 plus yards, but he would have had that one on the run. He would have had 20, 25. He might have went to the house on it. So he's found space. So that's encouraging. And he's a great blocker. Like, I know people don't really know what to make of the PFF grades, but he had like a 91 blocking grade, and everybody in Nebraska's program just says he gets after people. And he had that quote about how he loves to take a grown man and just physically move him where he doesn't want to go. And that got everybody all fired up on Twitter the other day. So there's a lot to like about where his season's gone. I think in the last month, he's really picked it up. I just hope Haarberg can find him a few more times this week and keep building that.
John, overall, as you sort of assess Nebraska's offense as we move deeper into the month of November, did Saturday's game against Michigan State sort of give you pause, or do you think it was more of a speed bump as they proceed here in the final 3 games of the season?
Honestly, I try not to come out of it with any more of a take than I had going in. I mean, the offense, yeah, they ended up losing the game, but in many respects, they played very similarly to what they have done in the previous, 3 or 4 games. The difference was the defense was a little bit better in those other games, and the special teams wasn't as much of a concern in terms of field position. The offense is really in a spot where it is what it is. I think if there was one thing, and maybe it was the grass. I mean, you guys, those of you who were there in person, maybe had a different perspective. It just seemed like Haarberg was just a little slower or a step less sudden than he normally is. Not that he's, Kyler Murray out there, but it just seemed like he was, how, if you've got your cable remote and you put it in slow motion, it's on that first click down. It just didn't seem like it was all the way there. But outside of that, really, the offense to me looked very similar to what it had been. They unfortunately make turnovers in bad spots. Sometimes the play calling gets a little bit wonky. If there was one thing that came out of it that was a positive, if we remember back to the Illinois game and all the silly penalties, no penalties in a game for the first time in almost 2 decades. So no, I didn't really come out of it thinking that the offense was all that much different. It just shows you how much this team has to really play team football in order to win games. And if one side or one unit is just a little bit off and you have a team that's just good enough to exploit that, it can end up, swinging a 3-point win to a 3-point loss.
Bruns, what realistically can we expect with Nebraska's usage of Josh Fleeks? You mentioned him when we were talking about the running back situation. He had the big touchdown against Michigan, but he also had a couple moments in the red zone last week on Saturday where you can sort of just see there is a level of explosion that he kind of has, or just I want to say after the catch, where he feels more dangerous than maybe some other options Nebraska has. Is there a way that they can utilize him more?
There is. I mean, I think they have to pick their spots with him. I mean, you look at most of the carries he's had. I mean, it's been stuff to the outside. He's a dynamic enough pass catcher that I think they could take advantage of that a little bit. I mean, we've talked about the screen game a ton. I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards, but I think you can do some short passes that aren't, more of a traditional screen to get him involved. I mean, I think, what was it, 6 carries he had last game, something like that. I mean, I think that's about the right number as long as you pick your spots with him. And I think he can be a little bit more of a factor in the passing game than what he's been. So, I mean, like there was like a back shoulder throw to, I think Anthony Grant was the one that was in there for that play. I know it's hard to just have a small number of plays built around one guy, but I think that's kind of where he's at his best right now. He's not an every down back, but I think he's an explosive change of pace from the other two. I mean, I think it's worth seeing what they can do to get him in space, because he is. I mean, you've seen it a couple times where he's a dynamic runner when he gets ahead of steam or gets the ball in space.
John, how did you feel about the sort of revamped looking offensive line in its second week playing together? More the left side, obviously, of Teddy Prohaska and Justin Evans-Jenkins.
Yeah, it was good in a pinch a couple weeks ago when Justin got in the game that, I didn't think really Nebraska missed a beat. There were a couple of times on Saturday where it looked like he got beat a little bit. And I know a lot of people are going to look at the 7 sacks and that reflects, poorly on the offensive line. But I would say, and I think Matt Rule explained this on Monday, that, a couple of those sacks were because, maybe Heinrich didn't climb the pocket or maybe moved into a sack. And one was missed on a running back blocking assignment. So it wasn't great. It feels a little bit like a step back, but all things considered, I don't think it wasn't the reason Nebraska lost the football game. It was a combination of different things that did it. And all in all, especially given, the news that we got 2 weeks ago I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, given all the injuries. I probably would have been more concerned in the moment that, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. And as we've seen, the Nebraska offense, while not great, hasn't taken such a noticeable step back because of it. So I think you're going to get some good experience out of this, and it's just going to make these guys better down the road. And especially once you start getting some guys back and healthy, I think it's gonna bode good things for the program.
BC, we did get to see Billy Kemp on Saturday, but probably not in a role that anyone wants to see him in again. What can you tell us about the punt return situation, and how do you feel like that played out for Nebraska on Saturday?
Poorly is how it played out. I mean, a couple of the fair catches, I think it was because it was so trained in his mind, like just secure the ball. I think that might have played a part in why he fair caught those at the 7 and the 6. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. But there was that one earlier too where he could have had like 20 yards of real estate. And he was just, I think, very trained, like you're just catching the ball. That's all you're doing. And Matt Rule took that on himself after this week. He said that was on him. I don't know what they're going to do because I don't know that they want to burn Ethan Nation's red shirt. So it really depends if Billy is capable of being a threat at all this week. He might go back there just with a little bit more aggressive nature. But if he's not, then they might say, hey, it's worth our while to let Ethan Nation burn this shirt, play these last 3 games and whatever comes after it, and really grow in that role. And that it'll be a little bit of a gamble. Like if that happens, that we're all going to debate in 3 weeks whether Ethan Nation had that one big return or whatever, So, but if he makes that one play, that's 40 yards or something special, and it turns a game, then everybody will be clapping about it. So I think that's where we're at. Is Billy Kemp's health is going to decide basically what you do with Ethan Nation. And if you let him have it, I did like how he stepped up there with confidence, and Ethan Nation, that is, and caught the first one and made a little move with it, got 5 yards. I mean, that was encouraging from what we've seen. So I'd be excited to see it if it happens.
Is Kemp healthy enough to help as a receiver?
Well, that I kind of think either he's all or nothing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, either he can do the punt return and receiver and be what you want him to be, or neither. So, I mean, give him credit for wanting to make a go of it. And I think he's a good leader in that room and stuff. And he took his share of criticism for those fair catches. But again, I think he was under coach's instruction there, and that played a big part in it.
Yeah. All right, let's switch over to defense, and we will start with this. Nebraska, is there a bigger lift that they could get defensively this week than getting the return of Prince Will Umamielen from the concussion protocol? Michael Brents?
It would be big. I mean, with the way he had been trending the last few games, I mean, not having him in there, it wasn't noticeable, but I mean, he's become one of Nebraska's better pass rushers. He's great in space, and that's what this game is going to be a lot of. So yeah, I mean, that would be huge to have him back. Malcolm Hartzog's the only other one, I guess, that's maybe a little bit questionable for Saturday, and that's at least notable, I guess, but kind of not as dire given you have Marquise Buford back. But yeah, I mean, Cam Lenhard seems like he's playing a lot better than what he had been coming off the injury. I think Prince Will gives him something there. James Williams sounds like he's going to play this one, and then likely I think we'll play the last 2. But I think having Prince Will would be big because he was playing really good football before the injury, and this is going to be a game where Nebraska is going to have to not only get after the quarterback quickly, but also be able to complete the sack if they're in the neighborhood for it.
PC, what have we heard from the coaches this week as they've talked about Maryland football and what to expect from them offensively?
Well, it all comes back to Talia and just like his ability to make stuff happen with his feet. I mean, he's thrown for 2,486 yards, and when you look at like where Nebraska's offense and you compare it, it's quite a contrast. So he's a very talented guy. But I think that they're very cognizant of contain this week. Like you can't let him get outside of the pocket and feel comfortable. And they're gonna have to get him to the ground and make him uncomfortable early in this game. Put some hits on him. I mean, it's got to be one of those old fashioned games where you make him feel you early in the game, and it starts to affect throws later on. Because if he gets in a rhythm early on, he's very difficult to stop. Their run game has been, not that great. But I always say, Nebraska's their corners have to play better this week, because this is going to be a real tough test for them. And Tommy Hill's got to be dialed in. He can make great plays, but it's kind of up and down, and he's just got to level off that performance a bit. Quinton's got to be an all conference kind of guy this weekend. That's what they're going to need. They're going to need to be really disciplined and sharp on the back end.
John, what do you think about this matchup with Nebraska's defense and what we've seen of it this year? And we know what we're going to get from Maryland's offense in the passing game.
Well, and this is why, I mean, I think you could make an argument that this might be the toughest to win of the next three, because where Maryland is strong, that's where Nebraska's strong unit, Nebraska, might be a little bit weak. Now, I say that, and you look back at what Tagovailoa has done, and really as Maryland's season's gone, his statistical line has gone. I mean, he was averaging upwards of 8-9 yards per completion those first 5 games, but starting with Ohio State and through Penn State, that number's almost been cut in half. I mean, he averaged, less than 5 yards an attempt against Ohio State, less than 6 yards an attempt against Northwestern. And, talking earlier about, his ability to get out and run a little, his numbers kind of remind me a little of Hudson Card, in the sense that if you remember the talk before that game, there was concern about Hudson Card using his legs, but when you looked at the rushing numbers, he didn't have anything overly spectacular. And I thought Nebraska did a nice job of kind of containing Card and not letting him, get away. And I think if Nebraska can do the same thing and then go to what, BC just spoke of getting just that leveling out performance by your corners, you're going to have an opportunity. The key is always, I always think back to this because I remember when George Darlington said it before the Florida Fiesta Bowl many years ago, when I asked him, what's the first key to stopping the fun and gun? And he said, got to stop the run game. And we're like, what? Really? The run game? What are you talking about? But it's that idea of making a team one-dimensional. And I think with, Maryland not being able to run it quite as well, Nebraska doesn't have to be terribly exotic in doing that. They just need to be who they are. Then they can really focus on what's happening in the back end. But yeah, this one has me a little nervous, because if we see first half of the season, Tagovailoa, it's going to be a long day.
Okay. All right, this question, each of you can throw out a name. We'll just go around the panel here. But who do you perceive to be the defensive X factor for Saturday? And we will start with absolutely no preparation that this question was coming, with Michael Bruns.
Nash Hutmacher. Like, if you think back to the 3 games that Nebraska won, in every one of those games, I mean, Nebraska unquestionably was dominating the middle of that defense. And I think it goes kind of what John was saying, if you can wreck shop in the middle and kind of own the line of scrimmage there, that's going to make Maryland one-dimensional. If the pocket's going back towards Tagovailoa, you allow your Prince Wills, your Cam Leonards to kind of come around and do what they do. So if Hutmacher, if Ty Robinson can really kind of own the line of scrimmage, I think Nebraska's defense has a really good shot in kind of shutting things down, because I think Nebraska has the athletes to run and tackle. If the defensive line is not able to hold up its end just in base defense, then Nebraska might be in trouble. So I think if they can have a big game up the middle, or at least an impactful game, I think that goes a long way to helping out Quentin Newsom, Tommy Hill, and the guys on the back end.
Bishop, who else stands out for you?
I'm going to go Isaac Gifford. When Gifford's had really good games, Nebraska's had really good games, and not that he was horrible last week, but there were a couple of times where he bid on play action. I think the big pass to the tight end in the first quarter was one. As long as he is, his usual disciplined self, and then obviously if Tagovailoa breaks contain, he's going to be one of those last line of defense, or at least someone that needs to be able to keep an eye on him while doing his assignment in the back end. So I think I'll go with Isaac Gifford, which is not to brag, but it's a pretty solid choice because again, he seems like a pretty good barometer for, how well Nebraska's defense is playing that day.
All right, BC, who you got?
I'll go back to Tommy Hill. I mean, I just think Tommy, his upside is way up there. And you go back to even the first drive against Michigan State, when they were in the red zone, he had a third down breakup where he almost could have picked it. And he's got that type of ability. And I think he can make that kind of play in this game. But he's had some of the other ones go against him too, where he bites and gets beat deep. And so he's just got to have one of those days where he was like really good. We get the good Tommy and, Nebraska, and he kind of thrives and gets a pick or pick six, something like that. I feel like this defense has got to make something special happen on one play or something. And he's the type of guy who could do it.
Yeah. I'm going to toss out the name Jamari Butler. I would like to see one of Nebraska's edge guys just sort of have a game where they're just kind of always in the face of Tagovailoa and making things difficult in the passing game. And I feel like whether it's him, Cam Lenhart, Prince Will, one of those guys, MJ Sherman, someone just gets it going from the edge. And it's just sort of in Maryland's head all day. I think that could be really helpful. All right, we're going to take a quick time out. When we return, it is prediction time. That's oddly specific predictions. That's picks to click and score predictions. Will anyone pick Nebraska on Saturday to beat Maryland? We will find out when we return here on the Husker247 HypeCast. Prediction time. I warned John Bishop. This is his first appearance on the Husker247 HypeCast, and so he has never had to make an oddly specific prediction before. But the good news for him, he's got Michael Bruntz, he's got Brian Christopherson, he's got me. We can show him the way. Bruntz, where are you going with your oddly specific prediction for Maryland's game?
I think Nebraska is able, against all odds in this game, to get a 100-yard rusher that's not Heinrich Haarberg. I think we see Emmett Johnson. I think Emmett Johnson just barely goes over the 100 mark. They get a late touchdown to kind of put it away and ease the tension in Memorial Stadium. So Emmett Johnson is going to plunge in from 4 yards out late in the fourth quarter, maybe like 7 minutes left. Defense is still going to have to make a couple stops, but he plunges in from 4 yards. That puts him at 101 yards for the game. And that to me would be a big upset as a 100-yard rusher. So Emmett Johnson, 101 yards in this game, with the late touchdown putting them over.
All right, BC, what do you got?
Malachi Coleman's going to catch a 57-yard touchdown in the second quarter. It's going to be kind of a crossing pattern. He's just going to catch it on the run. It's going to be a nice throw by Heinrich on that one. And, the guy's not going to quite clip his feet. He's just going to keep rolling. There's going to be no high-fiving a teammate on the way because they know that could be a penalty now, so they'll avoid that. So a 57-yard touchdown for Malachi Coleman.
Okay. Here's one for you. Josh Fleeks is going to score Nebraska's first and Nebraska's last touchdown on Saturday. And he's going to do it one rushing, one receiving. So 2 touchdowns for Josh Fleeks. There will be Nebraska's first and last touchdowns of the game. And he will get one as a running back. Well, he'll get both of them as running backs, but one on the ground, one through the air. So we're just going to eliminate all other context of it. You can imagine how it happens amongst yourselves. Bishop.
The forecast for Saturday calls for mostly sunny skies, a high near 60, with winds out of the south from 11 to 16 miles an hour, with gusts as high as 24 miles an hour. So imagine, if you will, when Nebraska is traveling to the north end zone, that they are put in a punt situation. Brian Buschini had a terrible game last week. We all know this. But Brian Buschini is going to take advantage of the gift of Mother Nature, and he is going to uncork a 60-plus yard punt that is going to hit inside the 10-yard line and do one of those Alex Henry 45-degree angle juts towards the sideline and go out of bounds at the 4-yard line, thus setting up Nebraska's defense in prime position to record a safety, which may factor in to the prediction that I have for the game coming up.
Wow. All right. He was ready.
Yeah.
I told you.
Very ready.
I told you. I was ready.
He was very ready. All right. Picks to click for Saturday. Brian, what do you got?
Okay, I was gonna say Malachi, but I got to go a different angle.
You talked a lot about Malachi Coleman on this podcast.
Too much Malachi. I'm gonna go. I think it was Bishop who said Giff is a key guy, and I think he's gonna play well. So I'm going to copy his notes a little on that, and I'm gonna say Isaac Gifford has a big game. I don't know if he'll get involved in a turnover, but that would be nice. But he's just gonna be. Remember when JoJo Domann had that kind of game against Ohio State that one year? It might have been his last game, and it was just like a really good performance. I think Gifford gives us one of those type of games on Saturday.
I was hoping you were going to compare the JoJo Domann, like the Dwayne Haskins hit that he had. Like Gifford's going to have one of those. Just
That'd
separate
be all right,
Tungavailoa from the ball. Nebraska falls on it. So that's where I thought you were going. I'm just going to take my X factor of Jamari Butler, make him my pick to click, and tell you he's going to have 1.5 sacks with 3 hurries on Saturday. Jamari Butler breakout game. Book it. Brunts?
I'll go Nash Hutmacher. It may not be reflected in the stats column. We're going to say he's probably going to have 4 tackles, but every one of those tackles is going to be one where you're like, you notice it. So Nash Hutmacher, 4 tackles, my pick to click, even though Emmett Johnson's going over 100 yards.
Bishop?
I'm going to play it easy. I'm going to go with Heinrich Haarberg. I think he needs a bounce back. Obviously, the tenor around him has changed a lot in the last week. There's still a lot of people that support him. Obviously, his coaches and Matt Rule loves him, supports him, loves what he brings to the team in terms of competitive level. Just play within yourself. Play smart. Let some of your other teammates work for you, make some of the easier throws that's certainly possible. And to BC's point, if you can find a Malachi Coleman who has been running open at times, I'm sure that's been pointed out on film. I think Nebraska, if they're going to win this game, needs a big play in the passing game. And I think Haarberg can deliver it with those windy conditions I talked about in my oddly specific prediction. It'll be curious to see who's got the wind at what times and how they can take advantage of it. I thought Purdue did not play it very smart 2 weeks ago with similar conditions, and I think Nebraska played it better. And as long as they do that and Haarberg can make just those couple of throws and limit the mistakes, the Huskers will have a shot at 6.
It does seem like if Nebraska makes a bowl game, after the game, it's going to be one of those situations where, you get Matt Rule talking about the weather and the impact as you're talking about the wind and all of that. And it does feel like I can visualize that scene in my head. All right. Well, we'll find out if anyone thinks Nebraska is going to qualify for a bowl game starting on Saturday. Maryland 1-point favorite. Last time I looked at the books, I don't know if there's any line movement there, but Maryland slight favorite in this game. What does the panel think? Brian Christopherson, where are you going?
Oh man, I'm gonna pick Maryland. 23-20. It's because of the consistency of the turnover problems, and until I see Nebraska break through there, I kind of expect it, and I just don't know if they can survive a day where you turn it over 3 times. And I might be giving Maryland too credit. I think high-end Maryland is pretty dangerous and kind of a tough outfit, and they're going to be kind of a wounded animal themselves, playing pretty desperate. And so I just don't love this matchup in some ways for Nebraska. But I'll say Maryland 23-20, close game. Going down the wire, we won't know who's going to have it with 4 minutes left, that kind of game.
Bishop.
Well, the numbers at times don't necessarily back Nebraska in this spot. Nebraska's been a home dog in the month of November 11 times in the last 10 years, and they're only 2-8 in those games. But if that line stays as short as it is, I mean, you basically have to win to cover. And this is a foreign spot for Maryland. It's only the second time in the last 10 years that Maryland's been favored on the road in the month of November. So I'm going to use my specifically odd prediction and say that a safety will be the difference in this one. I will go Nebraska 15, Maryland 14.
Yeah.
I like it. A 29-point game in Memorial Stadium featuring Nebraska and Maryland.
Which will be the highest scoring game in Memorial Stadium in the month of November.
Yes, it will.
That feels like a fair prediction.
Outside of the state playoffs, of course.
Sure. Yeah. Outside of what West Side puts up. All right.
Now, that might be a fun prop bet, right? Let's do West Side first half points in the Class A championship versus points scored the rest of the season in Memorial Stadium.
We could probably find a book that'll take that action, I'm sure. All right, Bruns, break the tie, 1-1.
I'm going to go Nebraska against my better judgment. I think this is going to be a day where the defense bounces back. Listening to Tony White on Tuesday, he was pissed. He's still pissed. I think he's going to be pissed on Saturday. I think he's going to call plays like he's pissed. I think they're going to try to get after the quarterback a little bit. I think Nebraska's defense is going to hold up its end of the bargain. Special teams will play about even. And Nebraska somehow, whether it's a special team score, a defensive score, Maryland turning around somehow and rolling the ball out of its own end zone, Nebraska gets to 25 points and wins 25-22.
Okay. All right. I am also going Nebraska against my better judgment. I don't know why. I just feel like they're going to show up and play well on Saturday. I agree with Brunts's assessment. Just listening to the clips from Tony White and really Matt Rule as well. And I expect a better effort from them. I think they would be the first to say they didn't show up and play with their best effort against Michigan State. And I think we're going to get that. Michael Severe said on the Sunday side session that Maryland, typically coming off of the Penn State game, has really struggled to put up points, usually has been pretty beat up in those games. And he thinks their motivation coming onto the road in this spot will be sort of hard for them to get up and play really hard after that game as well. So I think Nebraska's in a good spot here. I'm going Huskers 27, Maryland 21 victory to get to bowl eligibility. We'll see. We will see how it all goes. Any final thoughts from the esteemed panel here as we get people fired up for Nebraska versus Maryland?
Does the scoreboard go that high anymore? 27, 21?
Well, hey, look, it was 31-14 just a few weeks ago, so it's not terribly far.
So they have tested it. Okay. Right.
They're gonna send somebody up there mid game with some light bulbs to screw in a few more to make sure.
Hey, it's not like we're getting Iowa Northwestern here. All right.
Yeah, we'll get that in 2 weeks.
Thank you all for making me the jerk with your picks. By the way, I appreciate it.
That's why you went first. Your face just screamed, "I'm going to do something here."
Hey, by the way, if I hit any of my predictions, please do not. Well, if you tweet at me, I'm not going to see it until long after the game because I'm going to do my very best because Creighton is playing at the exact same time to go spoiler free. I don't know if this is possible in 2023. I want to be able to get home, get back into my chair, and watch the game on tape delay on the Peacock. So I'm going to see if this is possible in 2020.
Aren't they just going to have like the score flashed up during the game at some point?
Oh, probably, but I'm going to do my best. The last time I had to do this, I was working Nebraska women's basketball. This was like 10 years ago. It was when the 49ers played the Giants in the NFC Championship. And I was recording the game and I wanted to watch it spoiler free. And they would rotate the scores, on that old scoreboard they had in the end zone. And I was the whole game, I'm doing PA and I'm trying not to look up. And I managed to do it. So I'm gonna see if it's possible in this day and age to go spoiler free for roughly 8 hours.
Which of those games do you think was more entertaining? The 49ers Giants one, which I think the muff punt kind of ended it, or this Maryland Nebraska classic that we're gonna see on Saturday?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know which one was more entertaining. Of all the games I could not have been spoiled on, that was probably one that, I could have lived without being spoiled.
You could have just seen the score on that and kind of visualized what it looked like. I think that'd have been fun. All right, everybody. This has been another production from Husker247, the Husker247 HypeCast. We appreciate you paying attention, giving us your time. And of course, we would love it if you stop by Husker247.com, where we'll have plenty of coverage of the game. We'll have coverage of Nebraska's matchup against Florida A&M on Thursday. BC will be at the arena to let you know how that one plays out. And there'll be recruits in the stands on Saturday. There's high school action on Friday. I'll be at a game Friday night. So there will be plenty of coverage of everything going on as this calendar gets really busy here in the beginning of November. No better place to find all of the action than Husker247.com.